Awesome. Hello, and welcome to PDFtron's webinar, where we're going to walk you through the new feature preview, as well as provide you with a live demo and use cases. The way we're going to structure this webinar is that first, I'm just going to walk you through all the newest updates that are coming in the coming month on PDFtron SDK. And then later, we're going to take it away with kind of discussing more of live demo and use cases for how PDFtron SDK can be used. Now, for any of you who are tuning in just for the updates, the first portion is going to run for about 15 minutes, and you can ask your questions during the chat. After that, I'm going to hang back and answer them if there's any questions until the end of the webinar as well. Now, I'm Andrey, Director of Product Management here at PDFtron, and joining me today is Aaron Gravesdale. Aaron, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Andrey. Hi, thanks for joining everybody. My name is Aaron Gravesdale, Head of Solution Engineering here at PDFtron. So yeah, in my part of the webinar, after Andrey's section is done, then I'll be just kind of going over PDFtron's technology and doing a bit of a demo of some different use cases.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks, Aaron. All right. So first, let's jump into the latest updates. And then after that, we're going to do a bit of a live demo. Now, the two functionalities that I want to kind of provide you a sneak peek just for joining today's webinar is relating to two features that we're introducing. The first feature I want to take a look at is our PDF text editing. So what's happening here is that I have a PDF loaded in front of me, and as you may know that PDFs were never meant to be editable in the first place. What's happening here is that PDFs are not a reflowable type format, meaning that all the kind of the text that you see on the page is appended to a specific coordinate and position. However, at PDFtron, we've done the impossible and actually offer direct PDF text editing like you would through a Google Docs or Microsoft Word processor. Now here, I have blue kind of boxes, blue dashed boxes indicating all the different places that I can edit. And some of you may already have seen this feature that we had on our demo website labeled as beta. We're working towards taking it out of beta and providing the best editing experience possible. And you probably remember that our current version of PDF text editing actually pops up a model that you then go on to edit the text inside. However, we've done quite a bit of work to actually make it available directly inline. So for example, here I have a lightweight lawn chair that I want to go ahead and edit, and maybe to include a different item. So what I can do is just simply type in and daybed and go ahead and update. So as soon as the update is complete, I can go ahead and resize it and place it however I want directly onto my PDF. Let's go ahead and update. Maybe we'll have a new kind of styling guidelines, and instead of all caps, I really want to change it to the invoice. As you can see, as soon as I make the changes, there's the font preservation and the styles preservation on top of the document. Maybe my firm name got updated as well, and we included a new partner, for example, Andrey, right here on this company for exporting. As you can see, again, we reflow the paragraph. So if I insert the content that's larger than the text inside of it, I can go ahead and still update it. And to the users, the experience much improved where we're just editing the text directly on the place where we need to. So this functionality is going to come later in the possibly August release inside of WebViewer that you can just update to the latest version. Another demo that I want to showcase you is even bigger functionality. So what we have here is kind of multiple different new features that we kind of packaged all together. So first, let's start with this dual document view. This dual document view allows me to load up two different documents. It could be two different versions of the same document. Maybe we have an engineering report that we're working on or creating a new version of the contract. I can load them side by side. And what this does is that it simplifies and utilizes this same resource under the hood instead of loading the WebViewer twice. So it becomes more efficient in terms of loading time and as well as viewing experience for your users. Now, what else I'm able to do is I'm able to lock sync the scroll as well as the zoom behavior on those two documents. So if I press it, I can navigate them kind of at the same time synchronized. And we also support kind of offsets of the page if the document on the right or left is synchronized or offsetted by a single page. Once you lock the screen, lock the scroll lock, you can then kind of scroll them at the same time. I'm also able to place my annotations on top of two documents as well. So this is really helpful when kind of reviewing the two documents or having them to load side by side. That being said, it's different from the new feature that we're going to bring out later, where we're going to support the multi-tab experience on WebViewer, where the users can load up multiple tabs at the same time. This one provides us with a dual document view. Now, the next step for this dual document view, we can actually go ahead and check the different changes between the two documents. So let's say, as I mentioned earlier, there are two versions of the same document, and maybe there's been some changes inside of the text. We're able to highlight the differences by creating the red and green highlight annotations here, but we'll also build out this new comparison panel that includes all the different changes inside of this specific document. So for example, I can clearly see what versions, what has actually changed on the document simply by clicking it, and it will give me the highlight of a pair of changes. So now the user can simply just go ahead and review the changes list and quickly navigate between them as they go through the document. Now, as you can see that it does semantic text comparison. So it's not just spitting out a difference in characters, but also kind of tries to wrap it up to a specific word that has actually changed and detect that and provide a little bit more human readable understanding about the different changes that occurred inside of the document. So this is all, again, is going to come later in the August release in a WebViewer. Always feel free to reach out with any questions or feedback, suggestions on any ways to contact us. This is all for my portion, so I'm just going to stop sharing and hand it over to Aaron for a more live demo. Now, at the same time, that being said, please feel free to go ahead and ask your questions in the chat, and I'll be hanging back to answer them all.
Thanks so much, Andrey. Appreciate it. And so I'm just going to share my screen here and kind of just start off maybe with a bit of an overview about PDFtron in general, just as a bit of a knowledge reset in case some folks in the webinar are maybe a bit unfamiliar with us or trying us out for the first time. So PDFtron was started a couple of decades ago, really around the time that the PDF specification was first published. And our initial offering, sort of our first kind of product that we developed, is an SDK that we still offer called PDFtron SDK. So that's a native toolkit that initially was really geared towards processing PDF documents at a low level. So doing things like, stamping numbers on every page or adding watermarks or splitting and merging pages and things like that. But over the last couple of decades, the functionality set within that toolkit has really grown to cover the entire document lifecycle. So things like creating documents from scratch, converting documents from one format to another, like an image to a PDF or a PDF to a Word document. And let's see, we cover sort of the maturation stage of the document lifecycle. So things like kind of improving documents, like optimizing them or linearizing them so that they can be loaded very quickly. The functionality covers sort of the everyday usage of documents, especially around PDFs. So being able to do things like bring up a PDF in a sort of interactive viewing kind of user interface, and be able to scroll through, search, read the document, add annotations and fill out forms and so on. And then we have functionality around sort of the finalization of documents, kind of the end stages of the document lifecycle, with our ability to, for example, redact content from PDF documents, fully eradicating it, not just covering it up, but really fully removing it from the document, and do things like convert to archiving formats like PDFA, or in some systems converting to, say, Tiff as an archiving standard. So having developed all of this functionality and putting it into our central toolkit, what we did a few years back was take that same code base and compile it over to JavaScript so that we could offer that same technology set, but entirely inside of the browser and sort of sandboxed inside of the browser's memory. So that way we can perform the same functionality, but again, purely client side without having to call out to REST APIs or necessarily require any additional servers. And so it's that technology that I'll really be showcasing here in our demo, and that we have on our site here. And all of this functionality is stuff that you can go to our site and try out for yourself, even doing things like uploading your own documents and trying them out and downloading them afterwards. And we'll kind of walk through that a bit, but there are a couple of things on our website that I kind of wanted to just show off in case you are hoping to take a deeper dive into some of our toolkits. A lot of them are available through this developers menu on our site. This is where we have kind of the different platforms that we support. And we have guides specific to each of those, related to the different SDKs that we offer. So for example, the web viewer, which I'm going to be mostly showcasing today, has quite extensive guides on different use cases, as well as getting started guides specific to different frameworks like React or Angular if you're working with those in JavaScript, or specific to different integrations too. Like if you're trying to embed a web viewer inside of Salesforce, that's something that we've crafted the toolkit to be able to do. And the same is true with various other systems that we've integrated with. And then moving over to the native toolkit, remember that was kind of the initial offering that PDFtron offered. We have very similar guides for integrating that toolkit into different UI frameworks or on different platforms. And as well, we also have download links for these as well. So you can download our full production builds and try them out in your environment. When you download one of our builds prior to licensing, they'll run in demo mode. And demo mode is just really the only limitation of that is just that a watermark is sometimes added to output. Besides that, we make sure that all the APIs and all the functionality is enabled in demo mode. So that way you can really put the toolkit through its paces, make sure it works for your needs, for documents from your customers or your organization, and that way you can be sure that it'll work for you before putting it into production. So besides our native toolkits and our web toolkits, I just wanted to point out that we do also have our command line tools and additional modules here as well. So that way, if you related to the command line tool, if you wanted to avoid actually writing a new program but just wanted to leverage, say, a script from the command line, you could take advantage of our command line tools to do so. And then, of course, we have additional modules on here as well. That help expand the functionality set of our native toolkits. So being able to do things in kind of a server side or in a desktop environment, like convert CAD files like DWGs or DGNs into PDF, being able to OCR content. And this is something that we've expanded out. So we've added in a new kind of advanced OCR module based around Canon Iris. So we're quite excited about that. That brings some new functionality, including the ability to perform ICR. And then we have some other modules here as well, such as the structured output module, which is used to convert PDFs into Office files, or the advanced imaging module, which is used to support kind of not so common image formats, for example, DICOM. So anyway, just kind of pointing that out so that you have some idea of where some of this functionality kind of lives within our website. But if you do have any trouble finding anything, or if you're curious about particular functionality within our toolkit, another kind of great resource is our support. And so if you click on Contact Support here, you can get in touch with us here at PDFtron, and if you have any questions or anything like that as you're trying things out, feel free to just fill out this form under Trial Tech Support, and this goes to myself and my team, and we'd be happy to answer directly, or if needed, set up a call to discuss further. So anyway, just kind of bringing some of that up beforehand, but I think at this point it'd be good to sort of dive into WebViewer a bit more. So if you haven't tried WebViewer out, I'd recommend uploading documents to our live demo here. We have some that are here by default, but we also have some different documents that kind of show off some of the functionality that's available within the toolkit. And especially we have some pretty large documents here. This one, for example, is 13,000 pages. And it's one that WebViewer is able to load up pretty instantaneously. And then it's able to quickly jump to other pages within the document as well, despite being pretty large. And the reason we're able to do that is because WebViewer is able to take advantage of a feature of the PDF format called linearization. And what linearization is kind of the organization of a PDF, sort of like a video file, so that the bytes, the information for all of the first page is at the very beginning of the file, followed by the information for the second page, and so on. And so what that means is that WebViewer is able to download only those bytes that are necessary to render whatever is currently visible on screen. Essentially can take advantage of HTTP range requests to just grab a discrete part of the document and then instantly render that on screen. And if the document is very large, then in that case, we can discard bytes that we've already downloaded because we know that we can efficiently download them again. And so for the end user, it's very similar to kind of a native PDF or document experience because there isn't that lag time where we have to wait for the entire document to download before we can view it. And that also helps us support very large documents here. For example, we have here in our samples this 2 GB document. So if you do have very large PDFs that your users are making use of, those can be supported even here in the browser. Now, besides PDF documents, we have support for a wide variety of other formats too. We have built-in support for loading images. So we just, we have a few different image files that we've shown here, but we have support for other image formats as well. And with TIFFs specifically, we also have support for multi-page TIFF functionality. So if you have a TIFF that's more than one page, you can load it up inside of WebViewer and essentially convert it into a multi-page PDF document, one from each of the images inside of that TIFF. And when saving the file, we're able to save as multi-page TIFF in addition to PDF as well. So if you happen to be on a system that's standardized on that format, you can continue to still be standardized on it. And the same is actually true of Office files as well. So we've developed in-house the ability to convert from doc, docx, XLS, XLSX, and PPT and PPTX files into PDF. So essentially Word, Excel, and PowerPoint files into PDF here within the browser. So there's kind of an implicit conversion going on where we're essentially taking this Word file and converting it into basically a PDF copy here in the browser's memory. And so we can interact with it just as if it were originally a PDF document, doing things like adding annotations, drawing shapes, highlighting text, filling out form fields, and so on. And then when we download this file, we can download it essentially as a PDF copy. That said, as I mentioned before, our native toolkits do have the ability to convert PDF into Office again. So if you did want to continue to be standardized on this one particular format rather than converting into PDF, for example, enabling users to load up Office documents, view them in WebViewer, maybe make modifications, splitting and merging pages or something along those lines, and then you wanted to save that again as a Word document and archive that format within your system, you could use PDFtron's PDF to Office conversion to support that use case. Now, and we do also have server-side support for CAD documents as well. So if you were to convert, say, a DWG, DGN, DWF file into PDF beforehand, then you'd be able to view that inside of WebViewer. We also have support for Revit files, which can be converted into a 2D PDF. The output is very similar to when printing an RVT file. Now, besides just the viewing of documents, note that we have all these controls around here inside of WebViewer for manipulating the document or doing things like zooming in and zooming out. And a big request that we get often from people trying out the toolkit is how to change some of that. So often our customers will talk about how their users might be a little lower skilled or might be a bit intimidated by a user interface that has too many options for them. And so one big advantage of WebViewer is that you can streamline the interface for a particular use case or a particular user role. In terms of customization, we have high-level APIs that make that easy. So some of the more common customizations that we've come across, we've just kind of added in as high-level APIs to make it easy to tweak those features. So for example, it's very common to want to be able to get rid of the downloaded print buttons and to turn off text selection, just to make it a bit harder for users to grab this content, so they can't download the PDF copy or print off a copy or something like that, or simply select all the text and copy that out. So once we've disabled that, then it's a bit more of a just kind of view-only sort of experience without those download buttons there. And additionally, we can slim down the user interface further. So if a user say we're making annotations on a document, but was suppose they maybe were confused by too many buttons here, maybe had trouble selecting the right one. What we could do is just remove the ones unused by that user, leaving just the ones that they should be applying on the document. So that way, if all they should be doing is just highlighting, then we make that really easy by only having one or two buttons there available. And the same is true for some of the other elements on here. So for example, some of these panels we can disable entirely, or some of the different view modes and so on. So really, it's up to you what you would like to customize on here. Now, in addition to these high-level APIs for adding and removing buttons or adding custom annotations or things like that, we've actually gone sort of forward to the next step here in allowing customizability by publishing our full UI source code to GitHub. So that's available currently. You can go to our repository here, and the full UI source code is available here for you to download or fork and add your own customization into. So if there's anything about how the WebViewer user interface looks or behaves or feels or anything like that, you can go in and tweak that for users and give them exactly the interface that is optimal for them. With WebViewer as well, you can leverage WebViewer's underlying rendering technology or document processing technology within a third-party viewer also. So that's what this sample is kind of built to show off. What we've done is taken a third-party flipbook viewer that was available for free from actually GitHub as well, and we're leveraging WebViewer's rendering inside of this, essentially taking the render page output and putting it inside of this flipbook viewer. And again, the idea here isn't necessarily that your users, should be using a flipbook instead of some other interface, but the idea is to kind of show that if you have some existing document viewer that users are really used to, that maybe they've spent years working with and getting maybe very fast at or something like that, then with WebViewer you can take advantage of our rendering and conversion and processing support. But without having to change anything about your existing user interface. So this can be a very powerful way to upgrade to WebViewer's capabilities by simply replacing, say, the rendering portion within your existing viewer, and then you can start to leverage more and more of WebViewer as you continue your development. And so that way you can get something out the door very quickly that users can make use of and can leverage, but without having to rewrite the entire application right away. Now, one thing that we talk a lot about with customers of ours, and that is a big use case, is the ability to annotate documents here inside of the browser. This is one of the big advantages that WebViewer offers over something like in-browser rendering or some of the free toolkits that are out there. Besides kind of the fast viewing and the expanded file type support and the accuracy when rendering, the user interface tools that we provide out of the box are something that really makes it possible to give a very full-featured experience, similar to what you might be used to on the desktop, within the browser. And so if you have users who are, let's say, downloading documents all the time and having to manage those within their file system, this ability to give them the features that they're actually looking for here embedded in the browser is a great way of keeping them inside of your application and preventing that context switching and all of the problems associated with actually having users download files into their local machine and view it with local software. Since that's a security hole and leads to version mismatches and so on. So you can avoid all of that by managing that process and keeping the user inside of WebViewer here. And so these annotation tools go a long way towards enabling that. We have a lot of, sort of the familiar text markup tools that users might be used to from typical desktop PDF software. So things like highlighting or underlining or squigglies or things like that. We have some other ones as well. For example, the ability to draw shapes. So showing off rectangles earlier, but we have some other pre-built shapes as well. As well as kind of polygon tools like this cloudy annotation here that we can use to draw over a section of the document. Beyond that, we have the capability to do things like insert images onto a page. So, for example, if I were viewing this document maybe on a mobile device or something, with WebViewer embedded into the web page, then I could do something like take an image, maybe snap a picture of something, and then embed that directly onto the document. So here I'll just add a PDFtron logo, but perhaps if I were a facilities management worker, walking around to different parts of the building with a blueprint, then I could snap a picture of something wrong and then stamp that directly onto the document, which is great for adding further context. And that kind of leads into one of the big ways that annotations are used, which is for users to be able to collaborate on a given document. So notice that each of these annotations here that I've created, if I open up the comments panel here, there's actually a little comment thread that's created for each of these kinds of annotations. So for this circle here, for example, there's a kind of a discussion thread that's created. And the same thing is true of this highlight annotation or this cloudy annotation. And what that kind of enables for different users is the ability to have a bit of a discussion about each of these annotations. And that can be really useful in something like a review and approval workflow, where multiple users are viewing the same document and want to kind of discuss maybe issues related to that document. So let me show how that can kind of work in this sample here. So we can imagine maybe that this document is one that, say, a few different users need to evaluate together and look for, let's say, typos and things like that. And then once the document looks ready to go, then it can be published. Maybe it can go off to a printer or something like that, and then be mailed out. So let's say that I'm this Sally user here, and I've looked at some of this text, and I think that maybe this paragraph here needs to be rewritten. So what I can do then is I can highlight that section of text, and then that opens up a comment thread related to it. So what I could then do is sort of alert other users. Like, let's say I wanted to have this Justin user come in and maybe take a look at this document and see whether or not we should actually revise this text. So Sally here, to alert Justin, could say something like, could we rewrite this text? And can actually alert Justin directly. So WebViewer has built-in support for @ mentions, where you put in an @ and then a username, and then you can alert that user automatically. So with WebViewer, how this works under the hood is that essentially there's a callback function. So whenever an @ is mentioned, then you can handle that callback and do something like send an email to that user, or if you have a workflow system where users have a task list or something like that, you could programmatically add a new task based on this @ mention here. So however you'd like to alert the other users, that's totally under your control as the implementer of WebViewer. But so Sally here is alerting Justin, so we click Save here. And then once Justin has seen that there is something to be reviewed, we'll switch over to this Justin user here. And so Justin is able to go in and see this same annotation. Justin is set up as an administrative user, and so Justin is actually able to come in here and modify the annotations of other users. That's something that normal users are unable to do. And then we also have the the idea of a read-only user here as well. So this Brian user is read-only and can see everyone else's annotations, but can't actually modify them. But again, this Justin user is able to is certainly able to modify them and is able to respond as well. Justin maybe in our scenario here has reviewed this text and has said, well, actually this text all looks okay. We should actually move forward with it. And so then Justin could reply to Sally and say something like, Sally, let's keep the text. And then can send that message. And then we have these annotation states that are associated with each conversation thread as well. And this can be very useful for managing kind of where each annotation thread sort of is in terms of workflow. This is actually customizable. So we're using states that are out of the box as specified by the PDF specification, but you can change these to new states if you wish. And so in this case, maybe the Justin user is saying, accepted. So we will keep the text as is. Yeah, if you've ever used other kinds of systems like this, it can be a very useful way to kind of drive through the different tasks that are present in a document and manage that whole process. Now, as I'm showing here, this is sort of serial, like I'm sort of switching back and forth between these different users. Just a bit about that, by the way. So the users inside of here are sort of artificial ones that we've set up. The actual the API for setting a specific user within WebViewer's code, the client-side code, is just a set current user and a string. So WebViewer itself isn't doing any management of users or authentication or permission or anything like that. The actual password login of a particular user, or determining what level of security should be applied to them. That's something that WebViewer itself is hands-off on. Rather, what we want to do is provide a toolkit that can be integrated with whatever user management you might already have, whether that's Active Directory or some single sign-on solution or something else. Whatever way you have to authenticate users, what we want to do is just be able to piggyback off of that and be able to reflect that user information here inside of WebViewer's interface. And so that's up to you to go in and set the particular user permissions and the given username. But once that's set up, then that can all be preserved inside of the document with that username. Then we can use these @sign mentions for collaborating between different users and alerting different users. We also have the ability to do this in real time as well. Beyond just kind of this serial operation where someone makes an annotation and then later somebody comes in and maybe modifies that same annotation, we have the ability to do that basically instantaneously. So here in this sample, this user Ruby can come in and make an annotation on this document. Let me make this bigger actually here. So this Ruby user here, for example, can come in and underline this text here, highlight it, and then we see that that's reflected instantaneously in the view of this second user who's viewing this as well. And we see that it's recorded as Ruby in here, and then this user as well could make an annotation on the document and have that be seen by the Ruby user. So, for example, to come in and draw a rectangle around this paragraph of text, and then for the second view, that's seen instantaneously. How this is all actually performed is due to how we save annotations in the document. So here inside of WebViewer, we could save off a new copy of the document with these annotations burned inside. And that could be one way of sort of managing annotations and managing collaboration between users. So what you could do is have one user essentially check out the document, make annotations, and then check in a new version that has those annotations stored in them. And then another user can come and check out that new version and continue the process. But the downside of that kind of approach is that every time someone is making an annotation, now you're taking up that much more disk space. And PDF files, of course, could be gigantic. As we saw here, there was a 2 GB file that we could load up inside of WebViewer. And we wouldn't want to incur another 2 GB penalty of file storage every time we draw some squiggly lines on the document. So a better approach, rather than saving annotations into the document, can often be to keep the underlying document read-only. and instead to isolate the annotations in an XML layer. And specifically, the XML that we use is called XFDF. It's a format that's used throughout the PDF industry. For example, Adobe Acrobat can export or import annotations and form field information as XFDF, just as PDFtron's technology can. So that's why we sort of chose that as our standard for how to serialize annotation information. And so inside of WebViewer, what we can do is just leave the PDF document read-only, and again, isolate all the annotation and form field information in this XML document, XFDF. And so what that means is that every time one user makes an annotation, there's an event that's raised inside of WebViewer, and we can get a hold of this XFDF information for that annotation. So when Ruby comes in here and strikes through this text here, implicitly what's going on is there's an event raised in this browser, and that returns the XML for that annotation, and that can then be sent to the other WebViewer instance and applied to that document. So that's essentially how that collaboration feature works. And we have some samples on our GitHub as well, showing how you can take advantage of this in your WebViewer setup also. So here inside of this GitHub sample, you can see this diagram here. This is just sort of a code sample that we've released just as a starting point. And so we're using some default technologies like Node.js and SQLite to make this possible. But you could use whatever database or server technologies you're reliant on. It's quite generic. But basically, the sample out of the box sets up a server on your environment somewhere if you were testing this out, and then the browsers make a WebSocket connection up to that server, and then can transmit that annotation information encoded as XML that way. So one browser can upload that XFDF encoding of the annotations, and then the server can broadcast that back out to other clients so that they can have this kind of real-time experience that we're seeing with Ruby and Cedric. And the code here is quite simple, so I'd recommend checking it out. And if you have any questions about it, you are trying to set up collaboration. Once again, I recommend reaching out to myself and my team just through our contact support link here. So yeah, that kind of shows off some of our more basic document collaboration, and where that kind of can become more and more useful is in more collaborative workflows. So there are often use cases or scenarios where different users need to come and review a particular document, and there might be different levels of review as well. So there might be kind of an initial stage where some users are looking at content, maybe flagging it as potentially needing it reviewed, and then someone higher up whose maybe time is a bit more stretched thin, then can just briefly come in, look at the kind of suggestions that were made by that other user, and then review and approve those. I can sort of show this in action a bit more with our redaction sample. So this comes up a lot when redacting documents. So often we'll hear about the need to redact from those in a legal or regulatory context. What they might have are just huge document archives that have hundreds of thousands or millions of documents in them, and they might need to review all of them. Maybe it's for a court case, and they'll need to look for any information that's germane to a given legal matter. Or maybe it's something like regulatory compliance, like, for example, GDPR, needing to look for any personally identifying information in documents all across the organization, and make sure that that's removed prior to being archived or being released to the public, or whatever scenario one needs to remain compliant with. So that's what our redaction workflow is really geared towards. Here in this sample here, what we've shown is the ability to search for different regular expressions and add annotations proposing where redaction should take place. So for example, if I select phone numbers here and click on search, what that will do is use a regular expression for phone numbers, just a simple one, specifying a sequence of digits. And what it will do then is add these candidate sort of highlights, sort of showing where we might want to redact content from the document. This is something we could do interactively as well. For example, if we had some users whose job it is to go in and look for potentially personally identifying information, then they could come in and interactively draw a candidate redaction area here as well. So they might be saying, oh, well, this area as well, this bit of information, the invoice number and the date, that's something that's actually, surprisingly, it's a bit of personal identifying information. Once you know that invoice number, then you can find out who that person is, let's say. So, this might be something that we should redact as well. And so having gone in and made these sort of candidate redactions, then these annotations could be shared with somebody collaborating on the same document. And again, they could come in and sort of approve which ones should actually be redacted. So they might come in and say, oh, actually, this phone number, that's totally fine because that's part of this organization. So we don't need to actually redact that. So I'm going to remove that redaction area there, or maybe some of these other bits of content aren't, this requisitioner, oh, that's totally fine. Everyone knows that that's Damien. So that's totally fine. So, somebody coming in here to actually approve these can say yes or no to each of these. And then when they're ready, actually click redact all. And that will actually burn the redactions into the underlying document. So what it's doing here, by the way, it's not just sort of adding a black rectangle over this content, but rather it's fully eradicating the content underneath. It's going through the PDF document at a low level, and any of the PDF elements that happen to be within that area, that rectangular area, are fully removed from the document. So that way it can't be recovered. And that's something that's a bit of an issue with sort of lower cost or sort of lower, I guess, less comprehensive PDF toolkits, let's say, ones that might be doing things like leveraging open source or something like that. They might be sort of using easier ways to redact this content. So what some solutions will do, for example, is just add a black rectangle on top of the document, which is a relatively easy thing to do, but doesn't actually remove the underlying content. And so the problem there is that those are very easy to remove, or even you can actually see the unredacted content very briefly before the black rectangle occurs, depending on which PDF viewing software you're using. So that means that it's very easy for somebody to come in, especially on a very slow machine, and see the unredacted content of lower quality redaction solutions. But because we actually eliminate that content underneath that area, there's no way for somebody to do that. We also we keep the PDF content as PDF. So if you'll notice here, this is still text here on this page. It's still selectable, for example, on this page, and it still remained as true PDF text in this document. And that's because we haven't done something like just convert it into an image and then black out the pixels. That's a kind of very easy approach that, unfortunately, removes some of the accessibility information from inside of the PDF document, and so is not something we would recommend either. So that's why we developed this approach that we did of being able to fully redact without converting into a great big image. And just to kind of wrap up, that scenario where you do have a PDF that's just a big image, that's one that's actually pretty common. So a lot of times if content is scanned or faxed through a fax machine, which is still even still a pretty common scenario these days, they're still in wide use. So very often we'll hear from customers who have a PDF document that's really just a great big image on each page, and doesn't have any selectable text and doesn't have any fillable form fields or anything like that. And so we have a couple of tools that apply to that, and I'll just kind of mention these before we wrap up. So one of them is our OCR engine. We have OCR available through our native toolkit server side, and that can be integrated with WebViewer. So here, what I have is just an image-based document that doesn't have any selectable text. So when I hover over it, I'm not able to select any of it. But if I apply OCR to it, what that will do is send this image off to our server, and it's going to run this particular document through our kind of standard OCR package. And what that will do is detect the text on the page and then turn this document into sort of a searchable PDF document. It will take the image content and then lay over that the selectable text for it. We can see the exported text here on the side as well. And so that means that this document is now much more usable. I can go in and search through it and that sort of thing. The other kind of tool that we have for making these kinds of documents easier is our forms detection. So this is something that we've recently added here into this demo. And so we have kind of a similar document to the previous one. This one actually does have selectable text. But the issue here is that all the form fields have been flattened. So all of these form fields here, these are just kind of lines that are on the page. But our form field detection is able to take documents like this, examine how the forms are laid out and add in suggested places for the form fields to be added in, where we might actually, add as a PDF form field onto this document. So they're added initially as annotations here so that somebody can go in and again, have a review and approval process, or maybe they get rid of annotations, if there's it shouldn't be a form field there. But once they're happy with that, then can actually build that form and turn that into a true PDF form here. So I can, use this just as I would a document that were born digital. So that way that returns users to kind of what they're used to in terms of UI, and it makes for a very intuitive experience. So I hope this demo was informative today. If you do have any questions or would like to discuss any topic further, please do feel free to reach out. Once again, we're reachable here from the contact support button. You can get if you have any technical questions or anything like that, you can reach out to our sales team through the contact sales button as well. So yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us here today, and looking forward to hearing from you in the future. Thanks.